Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And it is absolutely amazing what the Xbox Series has done this generation. And the reason I say that is because if you take a look at where the Xbox One was last generation, there was a real question on whether or not there would ever be another Xbox console again. Then fast forward to now in 2022, and once again we've gotten confirmation of just how successful the Xbox Series has been this generation. It is just such an insane turnaround, and we will go over all of that later on in the video. Then also we did get a prediction about the Nintendo Switch 2, and according to this analyst, it still might be years away before we do get that Nintendo Switch successor, so we will go over that one as well. To get things kicked off today, though, we're actually going to be talking about a few different games that was just announced for the Nintendo Switch. The first one here, I definitely do think is being a little overlooked as well. This is something that I really do like to do on the channel, where I get to talk about these games that unfortunately do seem to be a little overlooked, and I think that the company man definitely fits the bill here. I mean, apparently this game has actually been out for quite a while on Steam, and if you go check out the reviews, 98% of people that reviewed this game does recommend it, but that's kind of the thing because it only has 50 reviews. So this game is definitely being overlooked, and based off the trailer here, it does look like it's very fun. It's got a cool concept, it's got nice humor, and I mean, I know that there's a lot of 2D platformers on the market, but I definitely think that the company man stands out, especially with the concept and humor. I think a lot of us can kind of relate to working for a business, and in this game, you do play as a businessman that's trying to fight his way up to become the CEO. Even your weapon of choice in this game is actually a keyboard, which is a nice little touch, and in order to power up, you actually have to go on coffee breaks. I just really like the way this game looks, and the cool thing is that you're not going to have to wait too long to play it, because it is set to release on January 21st later this month. So definitely go put this one on your wish list and check it out when it releases later this month. Now, as for this other game, they also announced Assassin's Creed the Ezio collection for the Nintendo Switch. This will include Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations, all for $40, and it will release on February 17th. This is actually a really good deal here, as this is 3 great Assassin's Creed. Well, I want to kind of say 2. I'm not really a big fan of Revelations, but Assassin's Creed 2 and then Brotherhood I thought was excellent games. They still probably remain my favorites in the Assassin's Creed franchise, so the fact that you can get these on the Nintendo Switch for $40 for all 3, I think that's a really good deal here. Now, if you do want to buy this collection physically, you can absolutely do that, but there is something important to keep in mind here, because apparently Assassin's Creed 2 is the only one on the cart. Unfortunately, Brotherhood as well as Revelations will be a digital download. That kind of defeats the purpose of buying something physical, but still, if you want that box art, you can absolutely buy this one physically as well. Next up here, we do have a timed PlayStation 5 exclusive to talk about, being Ghostwire Tokyo. Now, Ghostwire Tokyo is an interesting one because this is actually Shinji Mikame's next game over at Tango Gameworks. Now, Shinji Mikame has worked on some of the greatest horror games of all time, including the Resident Evil franchise. He's worked on Dino Crisis, and, well, of course, over at Tango Gameworks, he did work on The Evil Within. So they do a fantastic job with horror games, and that's one of the reasons that Ghostwire Tokyo has garnered so much respect, though up to this point we really haven't seen too much about this game. From what we have seen, I definitely think it looks interesting, but it seems like things might be changing sometime here soon, because it's now been spotted that Ghostwire Tokyo has been rated over in Korea. As we've seen time and time again, a lot of times when you see a game get rated somewhere, and an announcement for that game is shortly thereafter, and this can be a couple weeks, this could be months, but here anymore, it definitely seems like announcements follow these ratings, so maybe we could get an official announcement for Ghostwire Tokyo sometime here soon. There has been some rumors here recently that a PlayStation State of Play might be around the corner, and I know that Ghostwire Tokyo is technically an Xbox-owned game, as they did acquire Bethesda, and Tango Gameworks does fall under Bethesda, but we did see this last year with Deathloop. That also was a Bethesda game, and PlayStation did market that game a lot, as they did pay for for timed exclusivity. So I think that we could see something very similar here with Ghostwire Tokyo. This is another high-profile timed exclusive from Bethesda, and I think that they might very well showcase this quite a bit throughout the year as we head into its release, hopefully sometime in 2022. With this rating, though, it does seem like something might be around the corner. Now, we do also have some big Xbox news to talk about today, as Phil Spencer has been making the rounds online. He did have a big interview with New York Times, and he had something very interesting to say about these Xbox Series consoles that are on the market. As we all know, the Xbox Series X is still very difficult to get, as it sells out almost instantaneously. The Xbox Series S, that's been a little bit easier to get, but how well have these consoles been doing so far since they first released back in November of 2020? Well, apparently they've been doing very well, because check out what Phil Spencer had to say. At this point, we've sold more of this generation of Xboxes, which is Xbox Series X and S, than we had any previous versions of Xboxes. So it's our job to get the supply there to meet that demand. So here he does confirm that the Xbox Series is the fastest selling Xbox ever. That means the Xbox Series X and S is outpacing the original Xbox, the Xbox 360, and the Xbox One. And that is incredibly impressive when you take everything into consideration. I mean, if you take a look at the Xbox One last generation as an example, it was not a good generation for Xbox, up to the point that there was a very real question on whether or not we would ever get another Xbox console again. Since then, Phil Spencer and Team Xbox has legitimately changed the culture over Xbox. They acquired a ton of new studios. They got Xbox Game Pass. They brought over backwards compatibility, and they just built this excitement within the Xbox community, and it all just kind of snowballed directly into the Xbox Series. On one side, you have the Xbox Series S, which is the most affordable next generation console on the market, and then you have the Xbox Series X, which on paper is the most powerful console on the market. So there seems to be a real excitement for Xbox this generation, and they absolutely do deserve that with all of the work that they've put in. And here's their reward. The Xbox Series is now the fastest selling Xbox console of all time. And to just kind of think, this is all during a time that they cannot meet demand. This console could be selling even faster if it wasn't for those chip shortages. Right now, unfortunately, Xbox just can't build enough units fast enough because the semiconductor shortage. And really, you can say the same thing with the PlayStation 5. The PlayStation 5 has been dealing with the exact same problem. It's selling incredibly fast, but they just cannot meet demand. So these next generation consoles, yeah, there's just a lot of excitement for them, and it really is great to see, especially with the Xbox, considering the situation that they was in with the Xbox One. Now, as for how many console units this thing has actually sold, though, because we don't have an exact number, well, according to Daniel Ahmad, which does a great job with analytics, he did have this to say over on Twitter. This would put Xbox Series X and S over 12 million shipped, according to our estimates. The dual SKU strategy has paid off for Microsoft amid the supply chain issues, semiconductor shortage. Increased production of S allowed for more Xboxes on shelves than if they only had X. So there you have it. According to Daniel Ahmad, Xbox Series has already shipped more than 12 million units, which is absolutely fantastic. Though I do think that he pointed out something very important here, and that is in large part because of the Xbox Series S. The Xbox Series S had a very good holiday this year. This is something that we did talk about, I believe it was last month, because it started to become evident that Microsoft had a lot of Xbox Series S consoles in stock. The speculation is because the Xbox Series S is actually easier to produce, and as we're seeing, the Xbox Series S is still selling incredible numbers, which goes to show you that Xbox did absolutely make the right decision in having two different consoles. I remember going into this generation, there was some people out there that was very, very critical about them doing the dual SKU strategy, but it definitely seems like it's paid off here. I think Xbox has definitely proved that launching both of these consoles at the same time definitely has worked. But what's kind of crazy about all this is is that we're really only in the beginning of the generation, and Xbox hasn't even really got started when it comes to their big exclusive games. I mean, so far you have Halo Infinite, Forza Horizon 5, and a few others like Flight Simulator, but they really do have a ton of games in development because they have so many studios right now. So as I kind of keep saying, Xbox does have a very bright future, but definitely big congrats to Xbox here on all of their success with the Xbox Series this generation. Now, speaking of generations, we do also need to talk about the Nintendo Switch Successor today. Here in the last couple days, there has been a lot of talk about a Nintendo Switch Successor because of an analyst prediction over on GameIndustry.biz. This is according to Ampere Analysis, Pierre's Harding Rolls, where he made his prediction for 2022, and let's go and check out what he had to say. I'm currently expecting the console market year-on-year performance to be quite flat in 2022 as Switch sales decline and we come off what has been an amazing couple of years for console gaming. Even so, Nintendo Switch family of devices will once again be the best-selling consoles in 2022 at around 21 million sold to consumers, aided by the release of Switch OLED. I'm not expecting a Switch Pro in 2022. We have a next-gen Nintendo console in our forecast for late 2024, so I'm not convinced a Pro model is going to appear at all. And it's those last two lines there that are garnering so much attention, as he does predict that a Switch Pro will not make its debut in 2022, and instead it just might not happen at all as we head into a Switch Successor in late 2024. And some people do seem to be a little surprised by this, especially when it comes to the Switch Pro. We'll come back to that one here in a moment, but I think it sounds about right. The reason I say this is because Nintendo themselves back in November, they actually said that the Nintendo Switch as of right now is only in its midpoint of its life cycle. Now, the Nintendo Switch launched back in 2017, and this comment was made in 2021. So if Nintendo sticks to all of that, that would make the Nintendo Switch Successor about 3 to 4 years out. So late 2024, that actually sounds pretty realistic, to be completely honest with you. Now, as for the Nintendo Switch Pro, this is a console that fans have been talking about for several years now. We've had like a bajillion leaks, I feel like, when it comes to this console, and it especially was bubbling over last year as we headed into that Nintendo Switch OLED announcement. There was a ton of leaks out there pointing to a 4K Switch, but as we all kind of know, instead we got the Switch OLED, which is a fantastic device for fans that primarily play in handheld mode. But for those that likes to play on TV and they wanted that 4K resolution, unfortunately, you just didn't get a Switch Pro. The thing is that after the Switch OLED was announced, there was some reports going around that maybe Nintendo decided to not do the Switch Pro last year because the semiconductor shortage, and instead just decided to do the Switch OLED. I think that is plausible, to say the least, but the question then becomes, will we see a Switch Pro in the future? According to this prediction here, that might not be the case because we might just head into the Switch Successor instead. That is possible as well, but at the same time, it's really kind of hard to predict what Nintendo, out of all companies, will do. I mean, you take a look at the 3DS, and that thing had like a ton of different SKUs. You had the 3DS, the 2DS, the 3DS XL, the 2DS XL, the new 3DS XL, and then also the new 2DS XL as well. So it's kind of hard to tell what they'll do with the Switch this generation. But yeah, as for the Nintendo Switch Successor, I do lean on the side of, I don't think that we're going to see this console for another few years at the least. I think the Nintendo Switch is still selling phenomenally well, and they could really stretch this generation out with just how successful the Nintendo Switch has been, and it does look like it will continue to have success in the coming years as well. So, and this could actually be beneficial for the successor for the Switch, because with them waiting a little bit longer, this can help them not only get the technology that they want for the Switch successor, but also getting the price right, which is incredibly important for Nintendo. Let's go and take a look at the poll of the day, though, and with there being so much discussion over the last couple days about playtime and single-player games, I wanted to ask you all, how long do you prefer a game to be to complete its single-player campaign? And while it does seem like that this one wasn't quite as clear-cut as some other ones, which we'll get to here in just a moment, but if you take a look at the results here, 5% of you all voted for less than 10 hours, 36% being the majority here, voted for 10 to 20 hours, then 30%, 20 to 30 hours, 13% of you all voted for 30 to 40 hours, and then 17% of you all voted for more than 50 hours. So it does seem like most of you all prefer to be between that 10 to 30 hour mark, which, yeah, I think that's about right. I think for most games, 10 to 30 hours is the perfect amount, but this is kind of where it's not as clear cut because, as some people pointed out in the comments, it really depends on the genre. Something like a JRPG, those tend to be a little bit longer and maybe a little bit more acceptable with that genre. And okay, yeah, I can definitely see that. Now, there's still some situations with JRPGs that I find to be a little too long. You take a look at Persona 5 as an example. I know that that is a beloved game and some people consider it to be one of the greatest JRPGs of all time, but the big complaint with that game often is the pacing and just how long that game is. Persona 5 is a game that lasts more than 100 hours long, and it doesn't always feel like that it needs to be 100 hours, and that's kind of where the pacing issue comes in. But that's kind of the thing, because you can have a long game and still have it paced very well, so pacing is also going to be very important. So yeah, based on the comments, there's a lot of opinions about the length of it, and it's not always as clear-cut as I want a game to be between 10 to 30 hours. Nonetheless, though, it does seem like most of you all do not prefer to play these extremely long games, and I do completely understand that. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.